Welcome everyone, Grand Gnosis Master Dr. Thor Templar here. We're going to cover a very important subject area here, and that's religion, the greatest enslaver. Now this strange and bizarre way that humans work, which I believe has been engineered into them to suppress them. There's something about this plane in general that seems to create insanity, or insanity has been implanted in this species because of the awesome potential of the average person. I mean, it seems when we really get to the heart of everything is that this species, as bizarre, strange, and screwed up as it is, how psychotic it is, has extreme abilities built into them that many people can access, and everyone can access if they were actually trained. So what happens? What do you do about particular dangerous species? Well, I guess you could wipe them out entirely, and for one reason or another, this has been done in the past. We know of all sorts of things, and, this kind of mankind species, that the Homo sapiens, go back millions of years, it now appears to be. And there's been different times through the progression of these things where there's been major earth changes and the species has been dramatically reduced or almost wiped out. So I don't know if this is a practical solution or not, but what do we have? Well, we have huge amounts of parasites and funguses that mentally control us. You then make the species sexually psychotic, where all anybody ever thinks of is sex for no really apparent reason. You make them extremely violent, so they kill each other. Well, that's the easiest way to control a species, is why bother intervening? Let them do it themselves. Certainly doesn't make sense that a species that is so similar would highlight their differences, meaning skin color, etc. And of course, this is a big excuse, but when one culture isn't subjugating another because their so-called skin color is different, the people of the same skin color are victimizing their fellow people. This has happened throughout Africa all the time, and by the way, it was the Africans who enslaved other Africans and sold them to the Muslims that used them as slaves. And we can see how in places all over the world, where in Western Europe, where you have a little country called the United Kingdom, which is kind of a joke, but you got this one little island of England where there's different countries there, and people have been murdering each other. The Welsh have been murdering the English have been murdering the Welsh, the Scottish, etc., etc. Nobody gets along there. And of course they go over, even though they are racially almost identical. And when that isn't, then you murder the women, and of course then you murder your neighbor because you don't like the way he cuts his lawn. So this doesn't make any sense. If everybody worked together and we spent the trillions of dollars a year that are spent on military to kill each other, what would this planet look like? Well, just think about that. Just think if everything was done. And why is this not done? Why is there a overriding psychotic need to murder and enslave, combined with all the other things? Well, none of this makes sense unless there's actual interference from outside. It doesn't just make any. A species cannot survive that has this, so it goes against all the intergalactic understanding of how species work. A species that acts like this should destroy itself, and probably will, and we're already doing it with nuclear power plants that are leaking all over the place. And while major wars are only really a dream kept alive by the arms manufacturers, there's plenty of little skirmishes to keep them fat and sassy, with money pouring in their pockets. I'm not sure there ever was a major threat. There's really been no major wars since World War II, because now with the destructive power that everyone has, war is, in terms of massive wars, is not even thinkable because it's a mutual destruction assured reality. So nobody's going to do that. So, what does all this mean? This doesn't make sense. If we look at just basic understanding of how anything prospers and survives, it can't be in constant conflict. Why don't people work together to assist each other? And they don't do it on any level. We see this not only in a world, in a country, in a race. We see this in our own basic society. Our communities, and getting down to even the micro bit, how many people get along with their family? You see it on TV, but I don't know too many people that do. So nobody gets along with it. And why is this? Well, part of the problem is holding up comic book heroes and making them into gods. And why is a god needed for anything if there's no proof of it? I mean, we live in a society where everybody wants proof of everything, and occultism is laughed at because there isn't so-called proof when there, of course, is many. But we live in this very rational society, but everybody wants to run to some god or mommy and daddy to help them when none of this is ever shown to have any value. No gods have ever assisted anybody, and certainly no societies. And this is proof. I mean, people talk about all these things when they look at great forms of magic and the propaganda about the Ark, the Spear of Longinus, all these great tools. And the people who these come from, particularly when we go pre-Christian, the Jewish culture, has never been able to survive whatsoever, and it's still under great threat to this day. And because of their huge military support by the United States and their own final gumption to fight it out, and their ability to produce nuclear weapons and to have a sizable professional army, particularly against a bunch of sandal-wearing madmen, they are surviving. Not because of the Ark of the Covenant, because when the Jewish nation was destroyed entirely twice, not to mention they were enslaved by the Egyptians for 600 years. First, the Babylonians destroyed the Jewish nation, and then the Romans did. Well, where was the Ark of the Covenant? As I say, was the crank on the side to get it going and open the top broken? Hitler had the Spear of Longinus. Didn't help him much. Not only that, they had pretty much all the so-called holy treasures. Didn't help them at all. Quite frankly, you're talking about a 5-year war and an opponent that was relatively easily beaten. Certainly, nothing was produced of any great merit there. The same goes for the actual any other form of magic. So you could say, well, it didn't work because it was Jewish magic. Well, the Roman Empire, which of course was strong under paganism for 600 years, which is a long time to rule the world, fell while it had a Christian god. They converted over to Christianity, and where was Jesus to help them when their city was being destroyed and the Roman Empire was being eliminated? And we can go through all of this. Where was the Druid gods? And people want to give the Druids so much great power. Well, where was all that when the Romans were and did annihilate every single one of them, basically? Where were they? And we get further into pagan gods and people want to talk about warrior classes. Well, where was Thor and Odin when Scandinavia was being taken over by the Christian Vikings? Absent. Get together, Clash. Is Thor here? Odin? Absent. Where were they? They certainly didn't come out in battle garb and empower those who were trying to keep the religion alive. And of course, they were the last to convert, but this is mostly probably because of their actual physical location being so isolated and in such terrible conditions. And I'm not sure there's anything of value in Scandinavia that anybody would really want to hold that territory against aggressive adversaries. Fish can be gotten anywhere. But the point is that, and we can go from religion to religion. Let's go down to the Aztecs. Quetzalcoatl and their reptilian connection there, and having a huge population and societies who built massive structures. Where were they? Now, it wasn't, of course, there's a lot of misinformation there, but the bottom line is that it's still, the Spanish did conquer them and went through the entire continent from Mexico down to the tip of South America and took over everything. Well, where were the gods? By the way, the Aztecs conquered the Mayans. Where were the Mayan gods? And let's go back to those people who think there's such great empowerment in Egypt. Well, the Greeks first, then the Romans conquered Egypt and held it for hundreds of years. So, where were they? So, this whole idea of some god form protecting anybody is nonsense. The fact that people believe in all this stuff is nonsense. The fact that some reason, and the Christians seem to be the highest stupidity rate here at all, that you need Jesus to tell you not to murder and rape your neighbor. I gotta murder and rape, but I believe in Jesus now, so I don't murder and rape. This is just absurd. These are religions that are a couple thousand years old when civilizations go back God knows how long, 50, 100,000 years. These are not even babies. They're fetus religions that basically have taken all their information from older and older. And why would you need that to begin with? The only reason a religion would be put together is because it's a corporation that they want to take your money from and control you. There's no value in it. There's not a single society on this planet that thinks it's okay to do anything that we consider negative or based in the foolish and ridiculous Ten Commandments, which everybody believes, intergalactically, by the way, as just common sense. You don't rob, you don't steal, you don't rape, you don't murder. Well, duh, this doesn't work within society. Yet all these religions state that you can do that to other people. How conveniently, if they're people that don't believe the same way as you do, even if they're in your religion. As it says in Islam, you cannot kill any good Muslims. Well, as we know, there ain't a lot of good Muslims, so they kill each other all the time. So, as we move through all of these realities, what is the point of all this other than setting up a structure of empowering you to getting people's money and having control over people by not really doing anything? So what a con game of religion is in general. I mean, generally people fight wars, have kingdoms, they hold territories. Corporations generally produce some sort of product, even if it's not as physical, such as a search engine or a computer program. They're producing something. Religion is all made up, and if you don't believe the way they believe, they murder you. And if we go through the history of Christianity or any religion, Islam, you name it, it's all been enforced and grows not because people buy into the silly things, it's because you either believe or we kill you. This is well documented. So here again, this has nothing to do with believing in it. Anybody who believes in a religion, I've never met anybody who is religious who isn't as dumb as a rock. And I apologize to rocks who are quite intelligent and serve their purposes. Never met a smart religion. Matter of fact, they are the dumbest, stupidest, most immoral people on the planet. And of course, well, I love Jesus, so I just murdered your family, but it's okay because I'll go to heaven and we can be together. We'll be together because it'll be lovely and everything else. And just because I cut your little family up into pieces, I believe in Jesus. Well, that certainly is no heaven I want to be in. So, this kind of stupidity is the greatest enslavement of mankind. How can you get people to fight over, once they're, how much can you fight over race and other things? Well, let's make sure we bring religion in, and then we're going to make sure they fight each other within the religions. I mean, there are hundreds of variations of Christianity. There's 2 variations of Islam. I don't know how many sects of Judaism there is, but there's plenty. Buddhism has all sorts of different sects of Buddhism, depending on their location. Tibetan Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, left Buddhism, right Buddhism, up the Buddhism, down to Buddhism. Yeah. And we see this even with paganism and other things. There are different beliefs in different pagan religions, even though they have similar or use the same gods, but they interpret it a different way. So here we go again, and it's a big round circle of destruction. Now, until we get away from this fact that things are better because somebody else, it's out of our control, that we are inferior, that there's something called there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. There's no such thing as that. They're machines, and they'll never reach the level of humans, regardless of their quasi-human facade that some scientist will tell you that this non-thinking, non-emotional, non-based in any reality hunk of metal does for you. And being a lazy species, we keep giving up our control over to machines. Now, machines are important to assist mankind, but not to run mankind. When you give up your power, you're going to get into the huge perverse state as people have given up their power to religion. And what has religion created? We've had 4,000 years of Judaism. Certainly hasn't done very much. Certainly not a group of people that most people like very much. And I don't know what their impact on the world has been. I can't really say that anything positive has come from it. And that's not a criticism of Judaism unto itself. Nothing as positive has come from 2,000 years of Christianity or 1,500 years of Islam, or another 4,000 years of Buddhism. None of these religions have produced anything. Mankind is the same corrupt weasel that he's always been. So, as we move through this understanding, when we give up our power to these things, then they become a monster unto themselves. As long as we devalue ourselves as the superior enlightened beings, we will never get anywhere. Oh, well, we're too stupid. We need to have a book of stupidity written in verses and contradicts each other. I mean, the Bible is really a joke document that is extremely difficult to read, and it's all made up by one person after another. Just like Jesus never said anything about being celibate. That came from St. Augustine, who was a partier, and then, like so many who got old and couldn't probably get it up anymore, decided that all priests should be celibate. It's not within the doctrine, as it is not within the Old Testament as well. These are fantasies created by men, as most of it is. There's very little information that actually Jesus left, and this was all written down, as it was with all these religions, hundreds of years after their so-called passing. But the information left is pathetic to begin with. There's very little profound in it that hasn't been said 100 times or 1,000 times by numerous cultures that came before these baby cultures that are a few thousand years old. We don't need on every street corner a comic book church built to a fake god, whatever that is of your choosing. We need on every street corner museums honoring all those great people who really have done something for our lives. Those who invented antibiotics. Those people who have assisted us in building bridges and making vehicles and building airplanes. Those people who have made and built something we use every day, our roads, our systems of water, electricity, and others. We don't need these ridiculous, stupid, antiquated god forms that have done absolutely nothing. Nothing that the mythical Jesus ever stated was anything of any great value, and he didn't even live long enough to do most of anything. But of course, to prove he was a great person, he died. And of course, nobody saw him really ascend except some pseudo-prostitute and all the other mythological nonsense based on that ridiculous comic book religion. And they're all comic book religions. The comic book reality of Buddhism, Buddha didn't even exist, and who cares? We don't need, they want to connect everybody to a physical man when there is really no connection to it at all. Buddha is a title, basically. But let's not get into the arguments of that. And of course, the Jews are still waiting for somebody to show up, period. Solomon and other people and all, we all know they were just men and they were all murdered and died and everything else to go with them. There really isn't much to be proven there. But we need to honor those who have done things, who have made products, who have made breakthroughs. And, people can name movie stars, which are probably the lowest profession you could probably go into, the stupidest profession you could go into, and certainly not people of any kind of quality would even want to become an actor. I mean, it's a business. You can make a lot of money there, but pretending to be other people, saying words that other people wrote, well, what kind of ridiculous reality is that? But you people can name actors. They can name all over the world Ronald McDonald. But here's a food that even here, which is consumed by massive quantities, more McDonald's hamburgers are sold outside the United States than in it. And the founder of that should be held up. Now, if we held up our people and honored them, gave them strength so they could operate in a more valid manner, that they could be less corrupt because, look, we honor you. Do something of value. It's not just about making money. And if they had the support of the people, then life would change. But supporting some mythical god is not going to be anything that anybody can stand behind of. Because we all know that the only thing, if your god stands in front of you and someone draws a gun on you and shoots you, that god is not going to stop that bullet. You will die. It's about time we start honoring those great people who have done something in our life. that have created great things, created great businesses, who have had major discoveries. Who discovered penicillin? Who made the first antibiotic? Who synthesized aspirin? Who came up with the modern system of melting metals and making cars? You know the kind of amazing thing it is to build a goddamn car with thousands of parts and each one has to be molded and made and then assembled? This is God. Not some sort of sandal-wearing freak from the crotch of humanity known as the Middle East, which nothing great has come from. Nonsense. We need on every street corner to convert every single satanic church to the demon gods that they are erected to be converted into museums for great men, which there are many. And as stated, they would have been better men if they had been recognized and supported by the public. Tesla is one of them. What if Tesla had public support? What if everybody would have been behind him? And he could have operated freely, and his designs and ideas were grasped upon and empowered not by corporations, but by the public, who honored them and made sure that their wishes and desires were followed through with. And that goes for any great person out there. Where would we be without electrical power? Where would we be without antibiotics? Hundreds of thousands of people would die every year before antibiotics. Actually, millions. Today, tens of millions would die without antibiotics. I don't know a single person whose life hasn't been saved by antibiotics, including myself. So it means the entire population. What do you know about them? People talk about how important it is of so many stupidities. These people go by the thousands to these goofball churches. Well, turn off their electricity. See how many people show up at church. Or the boats that brought their oil over to make their gasoline so they could drive to church. They'd be sitting in a dark hole with a candle praying to some mythical comic book god, and you would have nothing. We don't honor our workers that make everything happen. I'm more concerned about that guy getting to work that flips that switch for my electricity than I'm worried about any goofball comic book god who couldn't even survive or stop his own execution. And we saw how great Islam is doing, blowing each other up and everybody blowing them up. Doesn't seem to be any problems with the bombs getting into the planes that are blowing the hell out of them. Certainly, Mohammed ain't doing nothing about it. This is what needs to happen. We need to value the greatness that we are as individuals, because we, as the individual, the human consciousness, is what makes and creates everything. This has been proven in quantum physics. Nothing happens until human consciousness interacts with it. Do people understand the potency of that? Not some god, not some religious symbol. You don't wave a cross over these things and things happen. No, the human consciousness makes it happen, and the human consciousness will either destroy this entire planet or make it into a great society that it can be. And it's not going to be some machine. Yes, it's nice to have calculators and word processors. I think it's ridiculous typing things and retyping them or adding up 50 mathematical equations. It's stupid doing that, which is the reason why we created machines to do it for us. Or should I say, to assist us in this process. It wasn't God that did it. And it certainly isn't individual goofball Middle Eastern societies. They don't even use the same language that we do. And language and speech being so different. Yet all great men from almost every tradition that has ever done anything other than goofball religious people who are still known today, idiots like Billy Graham, the Pope, etc., with their trillions of dollars that do absolutely nothing to help mankind, who live in palaces of homosexual joy, do absolutely nothing to assist society or do anything. Their gods don't assist them. Their gods don't make things better. When they get older, the popes are amusing. They sit there and shit on themselves and drool all the time as representatives of gods. And I think that is a great representative, because that's really what God is all about. An incontinent, drooling boob who really can't figure anything out. So that really is a representation of the manifestation of their particular God. And it's interesting that none of these popes live to be 100. Yet society does easily now. Isn't that interesting? Nor do they have any credibility or anything else, as the recent pope from Argentina worked with the Nazis to help assist in the murder of 30,000 people. Thank you, Jesus. So we don't need this false nonsense. If something's going to happen, it's going to happen from human consciousness. Your life that you value is based on computers, electronics, and automobiles that get you around, that help you do things. This is what your life is all about. Modern manufacturing methods to produce things inexpensively. But a lot of people don't understand that at all. People think that a computer goes from the beginning to the end and it pops out that way. Some machine does that, isn't that right, though? Yeah, there's a machine that does that from beginning to end. It's called the human machine. They assemble all these things. Machines don't put everything together. They make components. Components then have to be assembled, and people have no idea how much assembly is required to do most everything. Everything has to be finished. Very few things pop out of a machine ready to go. We need to honor these. Who makes these machines? Who designed them? Who was the engineer that put that together? Who assembled these? Who moved them into place? Who plugged them in, for God's sakes? These are the people that make things happen. You can pray all you want to your little mythical Jesus. He ain't gonna ever plug that machine into the wall that makes your life. Tear those churches down. Put up monuments to those that have done it. In the great societies of Atlantis, they didn't have statues of God. Don't believe that nonsense. That's garbage perpetrated by a confused reality that Plato didn't really know Atlantis. Atlantis was a confused reality that he was talking about, of a society that was a few hundred, maybe 1,000 years old. We're talking about Atlantis that is 50,000, 100,000, maybe even millions of years ago. They erected statues of their wise men, the people who did something, the people that were helping societies, those who created the things that they had. Where are our statues of our great architects, our great builders? Can anyone even mention more than 2 architects? Can you? Or those who invented the automobile? Those who make the great designs that we like? Well, nobody. Who designed that? Who made that? These are the people. If these were held up and these were kept in high regard, we would generate millions of people who would follow in that step and build upon that. But what do people want to be? I'll be a rapper. Yeah, I take the drugs, I screw the women, yeah, I drink a lot, I puke up myself, yeah, I got a gold toilet. And as long as we keep rewarding people like that, and these idiot actors and idiot sports people, we will be this shit society that we are. All of those activities should be minimum wage activities. You want to spend your life as a kid in high school where you can continue to play a sport for the next 20 years? Well, I don't think that should be highly paid. I don't think acting should be highly paid either. After all, almost everybody can act. Certainly there are those that do better jobs, but is that something that anybody cares about? Name me a movie from 1937. 57, 67, 87, 97. That's not too long ago. Oh, 2007. Name me a movie. This is nonsense. Name me a song from then. Well, these are transitory things. And certainly they have value, and these people should be rewarded for their efforts to do it. But you can't tell me a singer from the 50s or 60s, most likely. People have forgotten people. Few people even know who the Beatles are anymore if they're young, and whatever value they had. This is transitory. You're driving over roads that were built 100 years ago, buildings that are 100 years old. Things you use every day are things that have been created and continue to be maintained. How about just your water system? Who designed that? Who put that in? How about stoplights? Well, the Academy Award last year. Who gives a damn? The garbage that Hollywood puts out. Tear those churches down. Let's erect monuments to those people who have done things. Those great scientists, medical men, inventors, and the average worker who makes everything happen. You can make the best cement on the planet unless somebody is out there pouring it, driving the cement trucks there. It doesn't happen. Let's give value to those people. And if those people had values, if people were held up in high esteem, you would see the corruption rate drop to zero. People would be proud of what they've done. They'd be paid proper salaries. They would give value to that instead of some figurehead bozo who's the head of some corporation and puts his name on a building. Society is out of whack. It's completely upside down, inside out. What's wrong is right. What's right is wrong. This all stems from the nonsense of following some garbage comic book religion based on imbecilic images that are part of these garbage religions. None of these religions, and by the way, I think 1,000 years is long enough to give any religion a chance to make some changes of some value. Nothing has happened. Whatever modernization and civilization we have today is not based on anything that religion has ever helped, assisted, or created. A matter of fact, the horrible state of consciousness we're in today, which is the huge state of corruption, not the outside, because the outside image, the shiny up image, basically the gold plating that is over rotting, stinking, toxic lead of this reality is quite a nice little varnish. There are laws against everything of a negative nature. They're not enforced. Well, we've had 1,000 years, actually 2,000 of Christianity. And where has their moral climate, the great Ten Commandments, the great Jesus prophesizing, how has that created the society we have today? This rotting, stinking, corrupt society at every single level that really only honors one thing: money. Because the good people don't get the money. The workers don't get the money. They're not honored. They don't have statues in buildings. You can do the best possible thing for mankind, you're going to be ignored. And maybe you won't even make a penny like so many great inventors and others. We should have every great inventor, anybody who's got something new and interesting that can help society, should be honored. Yet we honor some dumb comic book character. And with Christianity, it's even further of a joke: a dead person on a stick. What? How ridiculous is that? I mean, it's comical if it hasn't caused so many problems. But what has all this great love and peace done for us? The world has not had any wars going on any longer. And of course, since the inception of Christianity, there hasn't been any wars and there hasn't been any problems for the last 2,000 years. Is that correct? It's nonsense. A matter of fact, when the Roman Empire fell, there has been no major improvements after that. Nothing was built. And you're talking, people have no idea how long ago that was. You're talking about the 5th century. You're talking about the medieval era being the 10th century. Nothing was built. No improvements. Nothing was done. What the Romans built is still in operation today. I should say the pagan Romans built. Right is wrong, up is down, light is dark, cold is wet. What is going on, people? I'll tell you what's going on. You believe in those non-reachable, nonsensical, goofball documents and want to build a monument to the stupidity of it all on every street corner out there, and then have people go by the tens of thousands of millions to these ridiculous places. This is what is manifested. If the local people were honored for their great deeds, if the great men were honored for their great achievements in science and medicine, and just the fact of breaking their back to put the road down that you drive your car on, everything would be different. It wouldn't be, I don't give a damn, just give me money at the sacrifice of everybody and the planet and the animals, but you're sacrificing your own life and your neighbors for greed, for things you don't even really need. People want to be singers and actors? That's what the achievement is? Stuff that is thrown in the trash 10 years from now? Who cares? But that's the values you get with a comic book living group of people. At least comic books are entertainment. The sick, perverted garbage that is written in these so-called holy books is enough to make you vomit, piss, and poo yourself all at the same time. The switch has to happen. We live in a horrible and terrible corrupt environment that must change, and it must change at the core. And this means we need to validate and praise what really manifests everything. And that's our own very empowered and powerful and ultimately very enlightened human race. We must change these ridiculous values that produce nothing, believing in stupid comic book gods. We need to convert those so-called churches into museums and empowerment centers, and the rest of them that are left need to be converted into apartment buildings for the poor and for anyone who deserves, which is everyone, to have affordable housing. We need to melt down the golden chalices. We need to take the money from these religions and use them for the betterment of society. They need to be taxed at the highest possible level, and worthless, disgusting businesses like this should have no place in general, but if they do operate for the ignorant stooges out there, they should be highly taxed. Change can happen, and change can happen easily. All problems that we have today are self-created through corruption. There is an answer to everything. There is free energy everywhere. There are cures everywhere. People could easily live to be 200 years old right now. This is all possible. It's not happening because of corruption. It's all about greed, people. All these people that do these things are all the same people that go to your church and are the hypocritical, rotten scumbuckets that mouth these things and do nothing to help their own people. They're highly corrupt, evil people. Not to mention that that degree of stupidity should be punished, I should say, by their own personal destruction. Anyone who believes in a comic book religion. What garbage. And look at the result of this. And that's okay? It's okay that religion has manifested what it has and people still follow it? The most corrupt people I've ever ran into are all those who are waving the Christian, Islamic, Jewish flag and doing absolutely nothing except filling their pockets. Change can be made. Time to honor the species that creates and makes everything. That's the human species. That's me. That's you.